Dear children, how are you? Keeping fine? Okay. Today we can go through the regional kingdoms of 18th century. As you know, 8th to 18th centuries is known as the medieval period. Here we are going to discuss about the prevailing political condition of India in the 18th century. In the North India, the Rajaputs, the Ghaznavids, the Ghurids, the Palas and the Gurjara Pratiharas were powerful rulers. In the Deccan, that is in the middle of India, there were the Rashtrakutas and some other smaller kingdoms. And in the south, the Pallavas, the Pandyas and the Cholas were powerful rulers. At first we can discuss about the North Indian rulers. The first one is the Rajaputs. The word Rajaput has been taken from the Sanskrit word Rajaputra, which means the son of a king. The origin of the Rajaput has been a matter of debate. They themselves claimed to be the descendants of the Kshatriyas of Vedic times. Some others believe that there were descendants of Central Asian tribes settled in India after the Hun invasion. Next one is the Gahadwalas of Kannauj. Muhammad Ghori defeated their king Jayachandra in 1194. Then the Chandelas of Bundelkhand. They ruled the land between the Yamuna and Narmada rivers. Khajuraho was their capital. It has many beautiful temples. Kirtivarman was the most powerful ruler. Next is the Ghaznavids. In the 10th century, a Turkish conqueror named Muhammad bin Qasim captured Ghazni and founded the Ghaznavid dynasty. Ghazni is now in Afghanistan. Sultan Muhammad, known in history as Mahmud of Ghazni, was the most powerful ruler. To make Ghazni the most powerful kingdom in the region, Mahmud needed a large army. While hearing about the riches of India, he decided to raid India to collect money to raise a large army. Mahmud of Ghazni attacked India 17 times between 1000 AD to 1026 AD. His early raids were against the Hindu Shahi rulers of Punjab. He defeated Jaipal and Anantapal and got a large tribute from them. He raided rich temple towns of India, Mathura and Kannauj in 1018 and Somnath in 1026. Even the precious stones embedded in the temple walls were taken out. Mahmud carried away all the booty to Ghazni, where he built a beautiful mosque, a library and museum. He died in 1030. Then the Ghori. Mahmud Ghazni also captured Ghor, another small kingdom in present-day Afghanistan, and made its ruler his vassal. After Mahmud's death, the Ghaznavids became weak. Taking advantage of this, Muhammad Ghori made Ghor independent and also annexed all Ghaznavid territories. Then Muhammad Ghori. He was an ambitious ruler, so he decided to attack India for wealth and for establishing an empire in India. Do you know his real name? His real name was Muizzuddin Muhammad bin Zam, later known as Muhammad Ghori. We are lucky, no? Want to remember only a small name, isn't it? He carried out a number of invasions to take over India and considered as the actual founder of Muslim empire in India. The first invasion was in 1175 AD. In that, he captured Multan. And in 1178, he captured the upper part of Sindh, but in the same year, that is in 1178, he was defeated by the Gujarat ruler. Soon he realized that Punjab could be a good base for further conquests. In 1179, he captured Peshawar and in 1186 Lahore. To conquer the whole of India, Ghori marched towards Delhi in 1191 and captured Sirhind. But the Rajput king of Delhi and Ajmer, Prithviraj Chauhan, put up a brave fight in Tarain, a place in the present Haryana, and defeated Ghori. Ghori was badly injured. In 1192, Ghori invaded India again with the help of Turks, Afghans, Persians, etc. Prithviraj appealed to the neighboring kings for help, but Jayachandra of Kanauj, cousin of Prithviraj Chauhan, not only kept himself aloof from the battle but helped Ghori. Thus, in the second battle of Tarain in 1192, Ghori defeated Prithviraj Chauhan and killed. In 1194, Mahmud Ghori defeated Raja Jayachandra in the Battle of Chandhawa. Thereafter, he overran the entire Ganga-Yamuna Doab. Qutbuddin Aibak became the viceroy of Muhammad Ghori. After this, while Ghori returned to his homeland, Qutbuddin Aibak continued his conquests in India. Then, dear children, which are the important invasions of Muhammad Ghori? Yes, the first invasion was in 1175 AD. In that, he captured Multan. In 1178, Sindh. And he captured Peshawar in 1179 and in 1186 Lahore. In 1191, in the first battle of Tarain, Prithviraj Chauhan defeated Ghori, and in 1192, in the second battle of Tarain, Ghori defeated Prithviraj Chauhan. In 1194, Ghori defeated Raja Jayachandra in the Battle of Chandhawa. The tripartite struggle. The tripartite struggle for control of northern India took place in the 9th century. The struggle was between the Gurjara Pratiharas, the Palas, and the Rashtrakutas. From the strategic point of view, Kanauj was an important city in North India. Its location was such that whoever held Kanauj could control the resources such as minerals, agriculture, and also trade of the entire Ganga Valley. So, to get control over Kanauj, they were engaged in a struggle. It lasted for 2 centuries and made all dynasties weak in the long run. It resulted into the political disintegration of the country and benefited the Islamic invaders from Middle East. At the end of the tripartite struggle, the Pratiharas emerged victorious. Then the Palas. Gopala founded the Pala dynasty. They ruled the present-day states of Bihar, Jharkhand, and West Bengal with capital at Pataliputra. Gopala and his son Dharmapala expanded and strengthened the kingdom. Devapala was another powerful ruler of this dynasty. They were followers of Buddhism. The country was prosperous under their reign. The Sena dynasty succeeded the Palas. Next, the Gurjara Pratiharas. Certain parts of present-day states of Rajasthan and Gujarat were under control of Gurjara Pratiharas. The most powerful ruler Bhoja conquered Kanauj and made it his capital. We saw in the tripartite struggle. The son and successor of Bhoja, Mahendrapala, expanded the empire further. His successors were weak. Mahmud of Ghazni defeated the Pratihara ruler and the dynasty came to an end. Now, let's pass on to the Deccan. You know the location of Deccan between the Narmada and Krishna river. Do you remember the most powerful kingdom in the Deccan region? Yes, the Rashtrakutas. By defeating the Chalukyas of Badami in 753 AD, Dendi Durga laid the foundation of the Rashtrakuta dynasty. Dendi Durga and his successor Krishna first consolidated the Rashtrakuta rule in the region of present-day Maharashtra, with Malkad as the capital. The location is in the mid of India, so they were in continuous wars with the northern dynasties such as the Palas and the Pratiharas, and the southern dynasties like the Pallavas, the Pandyas, and the Cholas. It weakened the Rashtrakutas and were finally overthrown in the 10th century. They were patrons of art, architecture, and literature. The famous Kailasa temple at Ellora and rock-cut Elephanta caves were carved during the reign of Rashtrakutas. They also encouraged the growth of regional languages, especially Kannada. Then, smaller kingdoms of the Deccan region. The first one, Yadavas of Devagiri. Bhillama was the founder of this dynasty. They ruled over the regions between the Narmada and Godavari rivers. The next one, Kakatiyas of Warangal. Their kingdom lay between the Godavari and Krishna rivers, neighborhood of Yadavas of Devagiri. Marco Polo tells us that the Kakatiya rulers were followers of Shaivism, though Jainism and Vaishnavism also flourished. They patronized Sanskrit and Telugu. Then comes Chalukyas of Kalyani. They were also known as the later Chalukyas or the Western Chalukyas. Vikramanga was the greatest ruler. They built many temples. The fourth one, Hoysalas of Dwarasamudra. They ruled over the region of present-day Karnataka. Vishnuvardhan was the most powerful ruler. Next, the South Indian kingdoms. Which were the kingdoms in South India? Yes, the Pallavas, the Pandyas, and the Cholas. The Pallavas became very powerful in the 7th and 8th centuries with their capital at Kanchi. They built many beautiful temples of stone. In the 9th century, the Cholas defeated them. Then the Pandyas. Madurai was an important center of learning. The region around Madurai was governed by the Pandyas with Madurai as their capital. By the 14th century, they declined. Then the Cholas. Before the 4th century AD, the Cheras, the Cholas, and the Pandyas were prominent in South India. In the 4th century AD, the Chalukyas and the Pallavas became powerful. However, during 8th century AD, by defeating the Pallavas and other local rulers, the Cholas once again emerged powerful in South India. They ruled over Tamil Nadu, parts of Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka. Tanjore, present-day Tanjavur, was their capital. Do you know who was the first Chola ruler? It was Vijayalaya. Rajaraja Chola and Rajendra Chola made the Cholas the greatest power in South India. Now we can study more about them. First, Rajaraja Chola from 985 to 1060. Rajaraja Chola, also known as Rajaraja I, was a brilliant commander. He defeated the Pandyas and the Cheras and captured parts of Ceylon, present-day Sri Lanka, and the Maldives Islands. He built a strong navy to control trade along the coastal areas. Then comes Rajendra Chola from 1016 to 1044. Rajendra Chola, the son and successor of Rajaraja I, made the empire even more powerful. He defeated the Cheras, the Chalukyas, and the Palas. He called himself Gangaikonda Chola, which means one who has conquered places up to the river Ganga. He built a new capital near Tanjore and called it Gangaikonda Cholapuram. Rajendra's campaign to Southeast Asia was one of the most daring campaigns. India had trade with Southeast Asia and southern China. But the merchants of the kingdom Sri Vijaya did not allow Indian ships to sail in this region. So they appealed to Rajendra Chola for help. He sent his fleet and defeated Sri Vijaya. Thus, the trade flourished again and made the Chola kingdom very wealthy. The successors also continued to fight with other kingdoms, and this depleted the treasury and weakened the Chola power. Thus, the empire declined towards the end of the 13th century. Then, art and architecture. The Cholas were great patrons of art and architecture. Most of their temples were in the Dravidian style. The finest example is the Brihadeshwara temple at Tanjavur. The temple is now a World Heritage Site. The Cholas made excellent images of gods and goddesses. These images were either of stone or bronze. Bronze images were more popular. The bronze image of Lord Shiva as Nadaraja, that is, Lord of Dance, is one of the finest examples of Chola sculpture. They patronized the growth of vernacular languages like Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada. Then, administration. The Chola kingdom was divided into provinces called mandalams, looked after by governors. Each mandalam was divided into numerous valanadus, and each valanadu into a number of villages. The village, called as Nad or Kuram, was the lowest unit. There were many towns known as nagarams such as Tanjore, Kanchi, etc. Local self-government was a special feature of Chola administration. Each village had two assemblies, the Ur and the Sabha. Ur was the general assembly and Sabha a gathering of all male adults of the village. These assemblies had many subcommittees to look after the measurement of land under cultivation, calculation of taxes and its collection, settlement of disputes, building and repairing water tanks and canals, and so on. Then, agriculture. For the development of agriculture, they extended the irrigation facilities and thus made the barren and forest land fit for cultivation. Kings granted land in dry areas and provide irrigation facilities. The Chola temples invested the money they obtained through donations in agriculture. Trade and craft also developed a lot during their period. A countrywide network of trade guilds actively participated in trade and they spent the money in agriculture. This is all about this chapter. Hope you all understand this chapter well. Goodbye.